Hello and welcome to Trinity Talk Live, water cooler conversation from a Christian perspective. As my wife adjusts the camera, I'll tell you that I am Ken Coughlin. That's my fault, by the way. While we were having some technical difficulties, I got up to make some adjustments, and I probably bumped the camera because we're like sardines in here. But anyway, I'm Ken Coughlin.
And I'm Ben Lander.
For the penultimate time. Sorry. Penultimate, big word. Not ultimate. It doesn't mean it's last. Look it up, boys and girls.
The penultimate.
Penultimate. Oh, God.
Because he's got to make up words. One of the things we will miss about you.
One of my biggest regrets about Ben leaving is we never got around to making the Bensels and Kensels. These are old school jokes that people probably aren't going to get. Anyway, welcome to Trinity Talk Live.
We have to pull out the Chihuahuas again.
The Chihuahuas.
The memories.
The tagline down there says it all. That's what the show is all about. We are water cooler conversation from a Christian perspective. Thank you for joining us. What we try to do on the show is we talk about whatever people are talking about around the water cooler, but we try to bring a uniquely Christian perspective to it. In other words, wouldn't it be great if when we're talking about all these issues, be they what's going on in politics, entertainment, whatever it may be, if we talked about them actually trying to put Christ first, as if Jesus Christ actually is our Lord and Savior, and seeing where that leads us and how that influences how we talk about these things. That's what we're going to try to do. And we do have a number of stories. We got 4 stories we want to talk about here tonight, which we'll get to momentarily. But before we do, I want to let you know that the conversation isn't just between those of us here in the room. It also includes you. You are invited to be part of it. And the way you do that is by commenting. We are live streaming right now on the Trinity Joppa Facebook page and the Trinity Joppa YouTube channel. If you are watching us on Facebook, then just comment in the live chat there on Facebook. No, on YouTube, live chat, Facebook comment section. Yes. And whichever one you do, it will then appear in that box over there to Ben's left. I had a flu shot today. That actually hurt when I did in that box over there to Ben's left. And then once there's a break in the conversation, I will see it here on my screen. If I don't, my wife will beat me over the head. And we will read your comment live on the air. We can interact. We can answer any questions, things like that. So please be part of the conversation. Join
Yay, my signs are still missing.
Yeah, well, we never found them. They're here somewhere. But anyway, so yeah, you're invited to be part of the conversation. Please do. Oh, the best shows are always where we get to a lot of good interaction. Agree with us, disagree with us, whatever it may be. We look forward to hearing from you. Just keep it respectful. That's the only thing we ask for. The other thing that we do at the top of every show, which we will do in a minute, we're not going to get there yet, but is we also, if you are not watching us live, but you still want to be part of the conversation, you can do that. If you're watching us after the fact, you put your comment in the YouTube comment section. So go actually to the YouTube channel, not the Facebook one, and comment on the YouTube video, and then we will read your comment at the top of the next week's show, and we will talk about it. And we will respond and all that. So you can still be a participant even if you're not watching us live. I feel like I'm tripping over my own words tonight. I want to start the whole show over again. Hi, welcome to Trinity Talk Live. No, I'm not going to do that. Now, I do want to, before we get into last week's comments, because we have quite a few to go over, I do want to kind of answer one question some people may be asking. And first of all, if you live under a rock, Ben made a kind of an announcement on last week's show. What was that announcement, Ben?
Well, this is my
Benultimate.
The next to last episode that I will be doing.
And why is that, Ben? Because he doesn't like me. That's what it is.
No, I love all of you. No, we're just, we've been given an opportunity, presented with really a call from God. There's a church that has called me to be their lead pastor in Muncie, Pennsylvania, and so that is where we are headed. So it is bittersweet that we will be leaving Trinity in pursuit of this new adventure. But
I have the perfect idea for a present I'm going to get you when you leave. It's a thesaurus. So you can come up with a synonym for bittersweet. So you have any idea how many times you use that word? Go back and watch your video announcement. I think in the video announcement, like you probably used it at least 3 times in like a minute and a half.
Oh, yeah. What is it? Yeah.
What's a synonym? If you're watching in the comment section, let us know what is a good synonym that Ben could use for bittersweet. So
Mixed feeling. I don't know.
So
I don't know another word really like just captures it.
sweet bitter. No, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. So
Sour Patch. Sweet, salty. I don't know.
now when he says it's his second to last show, that requires a little bit of explanation. Because that doesn't. Next week there actually isn't going to be a show. Ben is not around next week. He's going to be out, and I am starting a class, which we'll talk about in a second. And so we decided, you know what, we're not going to do a show next week. We will be back the following week, which is November 3rd-ish, I want to say, something like that.
Yep.
And so that will actually be Ben's final show on November 3rd. Okay, and so then the question then becomes, okay, now I've had some people ask me, well, what are you going to do with the show after November 3rd? And here is the plan right now, just so everybody knows what the future holds for Trinity Talk Live. We're still going to be doing it in some way, shape, or form, obviously without this gentleman over here to my left. But we are going to put a little bit of a hiatus on it because, like I just mentioned, I'm teaching a class here in the evenings starting next week, which, again, I'll tell you more about in a second. But that is going to take up a lot of my time. And so I'm not really in a position right now to, figure this all out as far as what we do with guest hosts and everything, or new co-host or whatever it's going to be. Plus, as you've heard us mention before, we are constructing a new broadcast studio here. As a matter of fact, we're hoping to get the final inspection here this week. I think the final inspection is supposed to be tomorrow, actually, for the facility. Cool. Now, that doesn't mean the studio is going to be up and running. That's just the final inspection for the construction parts of it. Now we still need to go in and do the set building and put the cameras and the wires and all of that's all got to be put in there. So a lot of the actual infrastructure. Stuff needs to be built, basically, to make it work. The stuff that makes it into a studio and not just a room, okay, needs to happen. And thank you to Ed Smith here. He's been doing a lot of the set design for us, and he's got some really brilliant ideas. I think you all are going to be really impressed. If this comes together, we're actually going to have 3 different sets that we'll be able to film on all as well as the studio. 4 if you count the green screen. We have a permanent green screen on the wall. But in a relatively confined space, but not as confined as this. So it's going to be really exciting. And so we're going to relaunch the show in the new year at the new studio with whatever the new look is going to be. So stay tuned for that. We'll keep you posted. But in the meantime, that doesn't mean you're out of luck. You can still get your dose of me, not Ben, because he's leaving. But I'll
drop some comments.
Got some comments. Thursday nights at 7, starting this next week, October 28th, I'm going to be teaching a 6-week class on understanding evil from a Christian perspective. The problem of evil is the number one reason why a lot of younger people, millennials, Gen Z, give for leaving the church or not accepting Christianity. And there's a lot of resources out there that are at kind of a lay level that might touch on it. You might find a book that spends a chapter talking about it or something like that. I don't think there's a whole lot out there that's really designed for the people in the pews that goes into much depth. And so lots of times you may take, read a chapter in a book and that may make you feel, okay, I get it. I've got my personal relationship with Christ. That makes me comfortable. But then what happens if you talk to someone and someone comes up and talks to you and raises this issue? Well, maybe that one little chapter isn't quite enough to answer what their issues are. And you're wondering, well, how do I talk to them and things like that? And so we're going to spend 6 weeks going into investigating this issue. Not Thanksgiving Day. That week will be off. But that starts 7 o'clock. It is going to be live streamed here on this channel. And you can, of course, come in person. If you do want to come in person, shoot an email to Lori Hinman here. That's L. Hinman, L-H-I-N. Start again. My wife was holding up a sign, distracted me. I see that. L-H-I-N-M-A-N at trinityjoppa.org, and she can get you signed up for that.
That's Thursday, starting when?
October 28th at 7 o'clock. It'll be probably about an hour and a half each class. So you can join us in person, you can join us online, and that'll fill in, like I said, until we get into Advent, and then you got to be watching us in December anyway. You're all going to be off Christmas shopping and stuff anyway. So, but then we'll be back in January. So, all right, and we do have. Edna has given you a big old heart. I'm assuming it's for you. I'm sure it's not for me. It's for
both.
No, it's
she
not.
Really
It's for
loves talking about evil. No.
Okay.
Thank you, Edna.
No, that's for you. We're gonna go with that one's for you. So, all right. So that being said, those are kind of the preliminaries to get out of the way. So that is the future plans. We'll remind people when we're back here again. No show next week. We'll go back in 2 weeks, and then we're going to be on a little bit of a hiatus until the new year. Let's get into, however, our comments from last week, because we did have several comments from last week, all from we're just going to call her co-writer or co-producer or whatever. I think we've mentioned this, we've given her the shout out many times. Allison Mayer does help us. She used to just send us emails with suggestions. We always say, well, this is the Allison Mayer suggested this show, and then this story that we're doing. And then it evolved into, and this is the Allison Mayer segment of the show. And now we just say Allison Mayer is one of the ones that helps us choose what stories we're going to do every week.
We've had entire shows.
Yes, we have. And so she's commented on the different things we talked about last week. I'm going to try to do these in order. The first thing she mentioned, I was commenting on a story that I know is near and dear to my wife's heart, the Alta Fixler story. She says, the Alta situation is hypocritical. The state decides it's in her best interest to no longer live, but she can remain alive under their terms. I might be wrong, but the Hasidic rules do not allow for assisted suicide if that is truly what is happening. Thanks for the update. This is why people struggle with self-worth and sacred value of human life. And again, if you haven't been following, we've been following the story a lot, checking in. But this is Alta Fixler's, a young girl whose parents are both Hasidic Jews. And essentially in UK, the hospital there has decided that she should be taken off of life support. And not only that, but there was medical procedures that the parents wanted to try to help save her. Hospital said there's no point to it, even though there were hospitals both in the US and in Israel that were willing to do it. So not only do they say, we're not giving her the treatment, we're taking her off life support, but, oh, by the way, you also can't take her to your home to pass, or, she's got to stay here in the hospital because the parents wanted to bring her home with them. They have some travel issues where, because of their religion, they're not driving. They have to walk to the hospital. It's also a bad, sad situation, but we talked about the fact that a lot of this just shows the cultural differences in the parental responsibility. In other words, here in the United States, we tend to think that the parents are the default ones to be making decisions in the best interest of the child, and the government only intervenes if the parents are showing that they're unfit in some way, shape, or form. Whereas this story seems to illustrate in the UK, there's at least some cultural movement that's the exact opposite, that it's the government that is deemed as kind of superior and better be able to make decisions in the best interest of the child, and the parents are subsidiary to that.
Apparently so. And the comment about, it being against Hasidic Jewish religion for medically assisted suicide, I believe that is the case. Although I wouldn't say that that's what's happening in this case. If anything, it's closer to medically sanctioned murder. But it is a sad situation, and
well,
I guess from an American
she passed
perspective.
on Monday.
Oh, she did
She
pass. Okay, so
According to this, she passed away in hospice on Monday. And the father said, I don't even know how to explain how I'm feeling. She fought for her life for 3 hours after the life support was turned off.
yeah, and I still struggle with this story about how to see how that is a humane option, more humane than allowing her to seek treatment elsewhere.
To at least try.
It did say that her parents were able to be at her bedside. So at least they were able to be
consolation.
with her.
Well, certainly we pray for Alta's parents and anybody who's affected by this as well, and or will be in the future because of the precedent that it sets.
And Sarah Causey gives you another heart too. You got two hearts now. And then she also says, hello, Pastor Ben and Mr. Ken. God bless us all. Live in Maryland. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah.
I'm just going to assume for the rest of the program that any hearts are for Ben. Okay.
No, Ken, this one's for you.
Aww. All right, let's move on to our next one. So then Allison also says, in this regard to story number 1, which I don't remember the order we did them in, but hopefully we'll figure this out as we read along. From my understanding, the citizens, which include parents, elect the school board. Now I know what story it was. Pay taxes so the board can be employed, but cannot comment on school board actions. Sounds like a new school board needs to be elective. COVID causing online education exposed the corruptness of school boards who are not interested in holistic education of the student, but in making money and pushing agendas. Good for the parents for fighting for the family. And if I were to respond briefly, I would say that I think the school boards would say, oh no, it's not that the parents don't have the right to say anything, but they can't. Okay, if I'm being skeptical, so they can't say certain things. That's not what the school board would say.
Right.
That's what we're seeing. But they're saying, oh, but the problem is more the manner in which they're saying it. And I guess and I think I can't remember if I touched on this last week or not. It's like, you don't have the right to be protected from the manner of it. You have the right to be protected from violence and threats. I agree with that. We talked about that. That needs to be stopped. But if a parent wants to come in and yell at you, then you sit there as a public official and you take it. You know, I mean, freedom of speech is not free if we say, oh, but you only can talk to us if you're going to be nice and polite and respectful. I mean, we as Christians should be nice and polite and respectful.
Sure.
Don't get me wrong. And as Christians, I would encourage that is the way we should comport ourselves. But if I was serving on a school board and a parent wanted to come in and yell at me because they disagree with something that I did in a publicly elected position like that, then you know what? They get to vent. As long as they're not being violent, as long as they stay within the rules, like if they got a meeting where everybody gets a reasonable amount of time. I hate these things that say everybody gets 10 seconds. No.
Yeah.
Okay, that's ridiculous. If you got to break up your meeting into 2 different nights, then that's what you do to give people a reasonable opportunity to speak. But let's say everybody has 3 minutes to say their piece. If that parent comes in, they're not threatening, they're not violent, they stay within their 3 minutes, but they want to raise their voice at me, then at least the way I interpret freedom should be, they're free to do that. And I, as a public elected official, need to listen to that and let them vent their frustrations.
Yeah, I think it's just ridiculous, and I think we touched on this last week about how they're branding these concerned parents as domestic terrorists effectively, and so it makes you wonder, you know, what's next? They're gonna haul them off to Mr. Rogers' re-education neighborhood, so they're nicer in their speech. I mean, what's the end goal?
All right. So next comment from Allison here on story number 2. This one's for you, MK. She says, "You go, big sis. I wish true body image was represented in comics, cartoons, advertisements, etc. I did a lesson with my 6th graders about body image and avatars in video games, quite revealing how video game stereotypes affect self-worth and value." And the only thing I would say is, not the only thing. The first thing I'd say is amen. I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I do think, by and large, that's still the case. I think if you look at some of the entertainment, whether it be maybe not video games, I'm not into the video game world, so I can't comment to that. But in, comics and things like that, and cartoons and stuff, you're starting to see in movies, and even movies like the costumes that female superheroes are given in movies, are starting to see some shifts where we don't need to be showing all that cleavage and things like that. And the classic example was on movie posters, for example. You would always there was a pose, and it would be kind of a joke, where if you had your male superheroes on the movie posters, they'd be up there, they'd be they're facing you, the person at the front of the movie poster, whatever, and they're looking bold and brave or looking off distance. And the females were always turned with their back, looking over their shoulder so you can see their backside. Mm-hmm. That type of thing is starting to change, but we've got a long way to go.
Or they were in profile, so you could see.
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to see some voices coming out about objecting to that, and that's getting louder. And I think that's a good thing. We need to keep that momentum going.
Yeah, I think in terms of video game body image positivity, Super Mario was ahead of his time.
The one video game superhero that I've got the right body type for. I could definitely pass for a plumber.
Pac-Man.
Oh,
man.
Are you saying I remind you of Pac-Man? I mean, I do eat a lot.
I'm just saying.
Maybe she says when you talk, she hears wonk, wonk, wonk,
Wonk, wonk, wonk, wonk.
Round is a shape.
I am in shape. Round is a shape, yes. All right. Let's see. Trying to go these in order. I don't see a story number. Oh, wait, there it is at the top. Story number 3. I've read many books on child development and parental influence on self-worth and value of life. Fathers in the home with mothers have a heavy influence in a daughter's self-worth, value, and body image. I read that the father is the first man to affirm his daughter's beauty, preciousness of life, value, etc. How this affirmation is presented to the daughter has lifelong effects on her self-worth and value. Also, an involved father teaches his daughter how she is to be treated by a man who wants her affection and love. Similarly with a mother-son relationship. Absolutely, parental happiness is not a justifiable excuse for divorce when children are involved. Thanks for talking about this. If you want to say something now, you can. All I'm going to say right now is stay tuned.
Pin.
Yeah.
all I'm gonna
Wait till you
say.
see our top 2 stories for tonight. So we might be revisiting this subject.
Yes.
All right. Story number 4. When a pregnant lady, or now considered birthing person, is murdered, that criminal is sometimes charged with killing the life inside the mother. Ironic how the life of a baby is conditional on the circumstances. If the abortion mantra is my body, my choice, then the mantra should be accepted in all situations like vaccine mandates, is what she says. I will say, yes, I agree with you in the last point in the sense that there's an inconsistency, I think, there. And this is true in, the pro-choice argument, I think, in general, is that we don't, it's almost presented like a universal statement, but they don't really mean universal. Even people who are pro-choice advocates, would not be pro every choice. There are certain choices, even they would acknowledge there are certain choices people shouldn't be able to make. And so that really kind of shows why the whole pro-choice mantra is kind of deceiving. And I won't go there. It's kind of deceiving because it's the idea is like, well, don't you believe in the right to choose? Well, I'm not going to say yes or no to that question. First, we need to answer another question. Choose what? And then you kind of boil down to, well, choose abortion. Okay, well, what is abortion? And so you still boil it down to that, what is it, being the prime question that you get there. And the other comment about you are correct legally. It's not universally true, but there are certain jurisdictions where if a unborn child is killed or let's say you assault the mother, and the mother is hurt, but so is the unborn child, then regardless of whether it's a murder crime or another crime, there are still considered to be 2 separate criminal offenses there. It's not just the assault against the mother. There's an acknowledgement that there's something else that was done here to that unborn child. Not everywhere, but in many jurisdictions that is the case. But like my wife likes to say sometimes, it seems sometimes that whether we decide that that's a life inside the mother's womb that deserves respect and mourning if something happens to it, seems in today's culture to be largely determined by whether it's wanted or not.
Yeah, and to that point, that even echoes Levitical law. I think we shared last week too, that biblically speaking, that it speaks directly to that point too. If 2 men are fighting and there's a pregnant woman involved as well, and she gets hurt, and the result is effectively a miscarriage, then the men are held responsible for the life of that child too.
Yeah. All right. So those are our comments from last week. Thank you very much, Allison, for your contributions. And again, if you are not watching us live and you want to comment on any of the stories from this week, actually, this is your last chance to do this. Well, maybe not, but last meaningful chance. Obviously, we won't have an episode next week, but if you comment in the comment section on the YouTube channel with any of your comments, questions about anything we talk about, we will take your comments up at the start of the next show in 2 weeks. And I guess technically, even in that show in 2 weeks, if you want to comment on those stories, you could. You're just not going to hear a response for a couple months. So, that's kind of what it goes down to.
January 1st.
So, yeah. All right. So, let's get on.
We have a texted in comment.
We have a texted in comment.
Yes. Well, little sis knows my son. Actually, she shared with me a link. So it's something we'd have to look into, but there's a link that she sent that.
But by the way, for our viewers, Lil Sis, my wife says Lil Sis, that's Allison Mayer. That's how she refers to Allison Mayer. So in case you're wondering who this text is from.
Yeah. Well, she called me Big Sis in one of her comments.
I know. I just want to make sure our viewers know who we're talking about.
Anyway, she did send me a link. It's just sort of an update. We've discussed Brian Laundrie a few times, and I'm not saying we have to bring it up, but there is a story out there that people might want to look into about possible human remains found near fugitives' belongings in a Florida park.
Okay. I had not seen that. Thank you for that. I have been trying to follow that story because, of course, everybody's saying that, I saw Brian Laundrie. I think I said on the show a while ago that I would be surprised. Not anything's possible. I would be surprised if he was alive.
Yeah, I remember you saying that.
So, all right.
Anyway, I just figured I would let you in. We don't. It's a little too late for us to look into it to talk about it, and with enough.
Yeah, but it's a story that we've been following and commenting on several times.
Potentially, we'll revisit it.
All right, let's get to our main topics for the evening. We have 4 stories we want to talk about in rapid succession because it's already 6:04. So, Ben, what's our first story?
Well, before I jump into it, I just want to say I recently went deep sea fishing.
There's a joke coming.
dropped my laptop overboard. It was Adele rolling in the deep. You can comment and just tell me our jokes are bad. My jokes are bad. Anyway, our first story tonight has to do with Adele, the pop singer, not the computer. This story comes out of BBC. Apparently, Adele had an interview recently where she explained her most recent album, which just came out, and how effectively it was a medium that she used to explain her divorce to her young son. Her son is 8, I believe, and she explains, really the first part of this album, the very first song that she wrote was Easy on Me, in which she sings the lyrics, go easy on me. She's talking about her divorce, saying it's not like anyone's having a go at me, but it's like I left the marriage, be kind to me as well. So talking about her emotions and everything throughout this marriage. For those of you who don't know, she married her longtime partner, Simon Konecki, in 2018 and filed for divorce very soon after in 2019. And her reason why she did that, well, she says, I'm just going to quote her, I wanted, and this is in response to talking about the album and how she's explaining it to her son. She said, I want to explain to him, her son, through this record when he's in his 20s or 30s, who I am and why I voluntarily chose to dismantle his entire life in the pursuit of my own happiness. So that's the reason she gives, really, for leaving this marriage. She does go on to say that nothing was wrong per se. She said it just, quote, just wasn't right for me anymore. I didn't want to end up like a lot of other people I knew. I wasn't miserable, but I would have been miserable had I not put myself first. Pin. But yeah,
I mean, at least she's honest.
I guess. She says, but yeah, nothing bad happened or anything like that. She just decided to file for divorce on the potential prospect of being unhappy. Yeah, and then she goes on to explain, she wrote the first song, which was really about this, and she let it sit for 6 months, and then the rest of the album came afterward when she began to use it as a medium to talk about why her, explaining her decision to her son. This also goes on to say that she and her husband live right across the street from each other. They share custody of their son, and, I guess ex-husband now, live across the street from each other. And the article does kind of touch very briefly on the tail end of it about her body image. She recently was in the media for losing all that weight, and so she said her body's always been objectified, and so she understands why it was a shock. And also there's an incident where she was accused of cultural appropriation. So she's been in the media here and there, and I think the last quote kind of sums it up. She says, I didn't read the room. Yeah, on a lot of things, but I'll let you comment on those things.
So I first heard this story. We help, my father-in-law get ready in the morning, and he always has the Today Show on. I doubt he's watching the show. He has watched it before, but I don't think he's watching tonight. But if he is, he'll know what I'm talking about. And he's told me sometimes he thinks the Today Show is more balanced, and I don't know if I agree with him on that. But it's Adele was not on the program, but Carson Daly they were talking to Carson Daly about this. I guess he must be their resident entertainment guy to comment on any entertainment things. And the overall tone of the whole thing was very positive. Oh, she's doing this as a way of healing. It's a way of communicating with her son. Oh, isn't this so great? My wife can tell you my disagreement was quite loud after that. And this, let's just say, did not restore my faith in the modern media. Not only do I think that she should not have been praised for doing this, I think, and I'm going to try to be as diplomatic as possible today, this was an example of really bad parenting decisions, okay? I'm going to put a pin in the divorce for just a second, okay? And we're going to come back to that. I'll let you take that pin, because I know what you're going to say, and I could say it, but I'd be talking all night. So, excuse me. We'll talk about the divorce in a second. Those people that know me know that there is you want to know how to really impact me emotionally, it's with kids. All right. Obviously, my own kids, people that have seen us, work through some struggles there have seen me in tears sometimes. But kids in general, I can't watch movies, and I think I even shared this one on the show recently when I watched the latest Wonder Woman movie, Wonder Woman 1984. I almost didn't make it through it because of a storyline involving a child. And unless if you're out there thinking, oh my gosh, did they kill a kid, torture a kid? No, it was nothing like that. But it was just there's certain things when kids are not being treated well by the people that they love, when they're not being treated right by a parental figure, for example, that tears me up. I don't have a lot of patience for people that do that, and I don't find entertainment in stories that tell that, just me personally. So yes, I was very much emotionally struck by this, because leaving aside the fact that I know you'll get into about her reasons that she's saying why she did the divorce, and at least being honest about it. If you really want to communicate with your child about your reasoning in leaving your child's father, because it wasn't just a divorced stepfather, this was the child's father, okay? Yeah. If you really want to communicate with your child about your reasons for leaving the child's father, you know how you do that? You talk to your kid. That's how you do that.
Novel concept.
Yeah. I mean, you don't broadcast it, make a whole album that you're going to sell millions of copies to make all sorts of money off it. And the other thing that gets me is she sits there and say, oh, this is for my son when he's in his 20s. Your son's 8 or so right now, 8 years old. And I got news for you. You're a very popular pop singer. If you don't think this is getting back to your son now, you're naive.
Yeah.
You're naive, okay? Your son is going to hear about how all these songs on this album are bashing his dad, okay? Matter of fact, there was one that she even described largely that way. Let me see if I can find the actual quote here. One song, this is I don't know what this article is. It's a BBC article I'm reading from, but the original interview, I guess, that it's referencing was in Vogue magazine. It says one song described by Vogue as an absolute belter of a relationship takedown is obviously about stuff that happened. That's how Adele talks about it. Why would you do that to a child? Why would you do that to a child?
I'm sorry. Didn't she say she wasn't unhappy yet?
She was, she said she was miserable,
happened.
but not miserable. It was nothing really bad happened. There's no abuse.
But she had enough material to make a song essentially bashing the relationship.
Bashing her son's dad.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't think this song's been released yet.
Or at least the relationship between the two of them.
This isn't a reference to the song that's been released so far. So this is another song that's on the album that I don't think people have gotten to hear yet. But regardless, I mean, by her own admission, the way she's describing it's a relationship takedown. It's bashing this kid's dad. No, not only should this not be praised, the media, the mainstream media should be calling her out on this. I mean, do we care about children or not? This is an example of what not to do.
Yeah.
If you want to have a conversation with your son, have a conversation with your son, but don't put it out in the public forum, making millions of dollars off it, or however much he's going to make off this album, for all the downloads for everybody else to see. I mean, I'm sorry, Adele, you have now caused your son more trauma. You have. All right. You say throughout this piece about how much trauma he was going through already. You just made it worse. So I do believe, which I'll let Ben get to in a second, that your divorce was about making yourself happy, and so was this album. I don't buy that this was something you did for your son. I'm sorry, because it's the opposite of what you should have done if it was for your son. I'm starting to get angry. I'm going to stop talking now and let Ben talk.
He's right. If you ever want to push his buttons, talk about kids or
suffering kids.
Do something bad. Yeah. But no, there's a phrase that's kind of tossed around, and I'm sure you've heard it before or even witnessed it with divorcing. I'm sure you've worked with divorce cases and things like that. But there's a phrase that's thrown out there is leave the kids out of it. There's frequent posts on social media where parents get divorced and they use like T-shirts where their kid can't even read yet, but the T-shirt says, calling out one parent or another over X, Y, or Z, and it's like. That's just number one, just causing your child more trauma, if not in the present, than down the road. It's not in good taste. It just makes you look like a petty person. There's just so many things wrong with that. But this one quote I'll go back to about Adele, even self-admittedly, yes, she did say it's about making herself happy, which, that aside, that's not a good reason for divorce to begin with. That's
Again,
another-
subject to abuse and things. We talked about this last
Right.
week. If it's a true abusive situation, that's different. That's not what we're talking about. But she openly admits that's not what's going on here.
Yeah, exactly. And even to Allison's comment earlier about, parental happiness is not one of those reasons.
Edna Lane, is it Lane? I don't
Line.
Line. Edna Line says this sounds like a me.
Yes.
I think Adele flat out says that's what it is.
I don't even think she's hiding it. But actually, there's this one thing in here. She says, if I can reach the reason why I left, which was the pursuit of my own happiness, even though it made Angelo, her son, really unhappy. So she flat out admits, I pursued my happiness at the expense of my son.
And she knew it. She's admitting that she knew that's what she was doing.
And she said, if I can find that happiness and he sees me in that happiness, then maybe I'll be able to forgive myself for it. Well, the fact that she's even searching to forgive herself, quote unquote, for this tells her that somewhere deep down in her conscience, she knows that this was the wrong decision, that she has something that she needs to be forgiven of. Secondly, your job as a parent, I'm sorry, newsflash, when you have kids, their happiness supersedes yours, or your primary responsibility is to take care of them, right? You become their caretaker. You make the sacrifice so that they can have, for their benefit, for their growth. And so I guess what you said, at least she's honest about it. I even underlined and wrote in all caps, what?
Yeah, I can't believe she said that.
In here. And then when you're a pop star and all of the fame and everything just compounds that issue. It would be bad enough if this were just, Sally Joe down the road and Joe, whoever, the what you see too often in America and in regular American households. But then when it's in the public spotlight, it's not going to go away anytime soon. And so every time somebody brings it up to her son, Angelo, it's going to reopen that wound, especially if he's already having those feelings of unhappiness. I think I might have said this last week's episode, every divorce impacts 100 people, just your standard divorce. If you are a nobody and know hardly anybody, even then, if you divorce your spouse, that's going to impact about 100 people. If you're in ministry, it's about 1,000 people. If you're Adele, I'm sure it's tens of thousands, millions of people. And it's just...
Well, case in point, we're here talking about it. I don't even know Adele.
Exactly.
Matter of fact, I'm so out of touch. I could not sit here right now. I didn't even fully get your joke because I could not name a single Adele song right now. Except for, what's it?
Yeah,
I mean, I would recognize them probably if I heard them.
Yeah.
But I couldn't make that connection and say, oh, that's Adele. I don't know. I'm an old guy.
Yeah.
But here's the other thing that I know we got to move on because we're short on time. But this quote that you read, if I can reach the reason why I left, which was the pursuit of my own happiness, even though it made Angelo really unhappy. If I can find that happiness and he sees me in that happiness, then maybe I'll be able to forgive myself for it. So wait a minute, are you thinking that when I read that, it's like there was no concept of actually asking your kid what would make him happy? It was such a self-absorbed comment that it's almost like, well, I'm kind of hoping, I know my kid's kind of really mad at me right now because I left his dad, even though things weren't that bad. But I want to be happier. So I'm kind of hoping that if my kid sees me happy, then that will make him happy. It's like, really, I mean, the whole thing is very self-centered.
Yes.
It's like, no. Why don't you actually, again, talk to your kid and ask, and find out what he's feeling and what his needs are. And then you as the parent go from there. But even this wishful thinking, like, it really is wishful thinking. It's like, well, I think if I get happy, then maybe everything will magically be okay with my kid. No, that kind of thinking is going to make your relationship with your son worse. All right. If I had advice, and it's probably too late because it's contractual right now, I'd say, don't let the album be released. This is going to be devastating for your relationship with your son. It's going to be devastating. You're bad-mouthing his father to millions of people, all right? Don't let the album get released. Instead, sit down and talk to your son and listen. I mean, you don't do the talk. The point of this conversation with your son is not for you to sit there Even what she's saying here, it's not for you to sit there and explain to your son everything that you're feeling and why you wanted this relationship to end. The first step in that conversation, not to say you don't get there, but the first step in that conversation is you to listen to your son and how he's feeling. And don't wait till he's in his 20-somethings to do it. I mean, that's the other thing. It's like, well, maybe when he's 20-something, he's going to understand. Really, what he's going to do for the next 15 years.
Yeah. At that point, the damage is already done. At this point, the damage is already done.
Yeah. So, all right. That's why I want to talk about this, because, I had feelings. I had feelings. And on a only slightly different note, we're going to move on to our second story for the evening, which is normally we do the surveys and studies and things like that at the end when we talk about them. But because this kind of tied into the Adele story, and I knew if I didn't do the Adele story right off the top, I'd be chomping at the bit the whole episode. So wanted to get that one out. But this is an article from the Christian Post. It's called "Fewer Americans Think Marriage is Needed to Create Strong Families," a new poll suggests. And it actually talks about a finding from a 2021 study, the American Family Survey, which was just revealed by Deseret News and the Center for the Study of Elections and Democracy at Brigham Young University, just released on October 12th. It was a poll that was conducted of 3,200 people. The final number of people that responded, they had an adequate data set, was 3,000. So it's essentially, for all intents and purposes, a poll of 3,000 people. And they compared it to previous surveys as well. And one of the results, for example, that currently the 2021 study, only 45% of Americans agree that society is better off when more people are married. This is down from 56% just 4 years ago in 2017. So in 4 years, that number has dropped by 11%. All right. It also indicated that the number of people who believe marriage is needed to create strong families is now at 52%. And that's gone down 10 percentage points from 2015. So over the past 6 years, that's dropped from 62% to 52% of people who believe marriage is needed to create strong families. On the reverse side of things, if you look at those who believe marriage is old-fashioned and out of date, that's 19% of people today said yes to that. That was up from 12% 6 years ago. So that's increased 7% over the course of 6 years. And the study talks about how, some potential causes for some of these changing views of marriage. And one of the things it mentioned, for example, was that, we're seeing increased secularism in society. In other words, religion, Christianity obviously being many long times, the dominant religion in America, religion is playing a lesser role. Your atheists, your nuns are increasing. They're still a very small percentage of the overall population, but it's increasing. And so as people abandon, or even those who are claiming to be religious in some way, shape, or form, may not really be internalizing that, may not really be living those values, as we become more of a secular society, then this religious emphasis that's put on marriage is starting to evaporate. But what was really interesting is Hal Boyd, who is the executive editor of Deseret National, who released this survey, actually pointed out something that I was going to say if he didn't, that forget the religious angle for a second here, and obviously Christianity puts a value on marriage, but he says that statistics just in general show that people have higher life satisfaction when they're married. He stressed that they show that marriage is better for children, all right? And he hopes that people realize that marriage actually has benefits, contrary to the trajectory we're seeing in these views. So, Ben, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I'm going to give my parental response. I'm not even upset. I'm just disappointed.
America, I'm so disappointed in you. Yeah.
I mean, in society, it's like every time you turn around. But, and am I surprised? No. Especially, when the one comment where he talks about making that connection between an increase in secularism and a decrease in the value of marriage. This is my surprise face. Yeah, we should expect that. Yeah. Biblically speaking, God places a high value on marriage. It's the foundation of our society. It's God ordained. The very first wedding, God presents Eve to Adam, almost like a father presenting his daughter to her husband. And that's kind of how society is built. He says, go, be fruitful and multiply. That's the cultural mandate. And so the earth is to be filled and subdued and bring glory to God in so much as we are following his command in the framework that he's set out for us. And so, am I surprised by the findings here? No, not really at all. Am I disappointed by them? Sure. And I think the one that really got me was the first one, the down 11% in 4 years. I mean,
4 years,
that's a big trend in a relatively small amount of time.
Yeah.
And so if that trend continues, as we have seen other trends, such as, the decrease in church attendance and rates like that, we've seen a steady decrease, and, we can only expect the same if nothing changes here. Maybe there's some kind of leveling out point, some saturation point where, people wake up and realize, like, hey, yeah, we kind of need families.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the building block of society, or society just collapses around us in general. Yeah, I guess we can speculate as to what happens in the future if this does continue. But if nothing else, I mean, that's a household, beyond the benefits that he mentions here, the happiness and, just overall satisfaction with your marriage. Those are great benefits, but really there's a larger benefit to society when there's strong marriages at the foundation of it.
Yeah, and I think, I'm glad you brought up like the decreasing church attendance things, because I think when we look at surveys like this, sometimes we tend to look at them microcosmically, where we look at this one issue and we lose sight of the big picture, that this is just one symptom that's indicative of a larger picture, of a larger phenomenon. And, when you see the decreasing value in marriage, I think is quite obviously related to the increasing secularization of our society, where God just isn't playing as big of a role for many people in their daily lives. Well, obviously, you would expect to see that what God values is then going to not be as valued by society when that happens. But there's a lot of things that are kind of factors into that are also symptoms of that, not just this, like the decreasing church attendance, I think is something. So the question that becomes, we see here is, well, what do we as Christians do about it? And I think the tendency of a lot of people when they see something like this is, oh, we've got to get out there and just yell at people that, marriage is important, and, God wants you to be married, and values of marriage between a man and a woman and all that. And so you have to value it. Dag nabbit, you have to value it or else, almost mentality. And I don't think that's not how you make cultural change. All right. Cultures don't change through mandates. That's just not the way it works.
And biblically speaking, I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily the Christian response either, because there is a biblical higher calling to celibacy. Right. So the deeper issue you're probably getting at is, I'll let you finish.
Well, so I just think that, what we need to do is, we need to, if we want to see change, we want to change culture, first of all, let me ask you a question. Is there something in the Bible about, you come to accept Christ and something comes and indwells you, some person,
Holy Spirit.
yeah, and the Holy Spirit can, what's the word I'm looking for? Change you, right? Yeah. And so that's, and so we have within our theology here, we have a mechanism for change that we all acknowledge. We acknowledge him, that, that this is what the Holy Spirit has done for me. And I thank him for that. Well, then if we want cultural change, then why are we trying to do it without the Holy Spirit? It's kind of like, if you really believe all this stuff, then you have this person of the Trinity, that this is what he does. This is his thing, So, and I get news for you, he's better at it than I am. All right. So why would I try to go out with lesser tools rather than the greater tool? So what do? We pray. And we ask to be used as vessels for the Holy Spirit, and different ways to reach different people. Whether you go out and you serve your community, so you know who you are. You share the gospel, you share your story, so that people start to see how the Holy Spirit is working in you, and then will ask, for salvation themselves, and they'll ask for the Holy Spirit to indwell them, and then that's how you make cultural change, not by yelling at people. So
yeah, and think the church is designed and called to be the moral compass of society. And so the more that people see God at work and the Holy Spirit at work through us, then there's an attraction there. If there's people want to just see really, they don't care what you know. They care about how you treat them and what they see. What's that saying? People don't care what you know until they know that you care. I know it might be overused. It's cliche at this point, but really, there needs to be a genuineness, a sincerity in our relationships. If we can model strong marriages and strong families, then that's kind of the starting point to making a change in society.
There was a meme that a friend of mine posted on Facebook this past week. And speaking of, people who want to know that you care, and I get it. It was actually a meme that was posted by an atheist woman who was saying that essentially the point was she didn't like being told that she couldn't have a good set of moral values because she was an atheist. And she said, whether or not I live morally has nothing to do with whether or not I believe in a magical sky fairy. And we've had this conversation before.
Yeah.
You can have a sky wizard. I'm sorry,
okay.
magical sky wizard. Thank you. And it's like, and I kind of responded, like, look, Christians will agree that you can have an internal moral code that resembles just pretty much the same as everybody else. I didn't go into what the moral argument actually is. Like, that's not what the moral argument is. We agree with that. But may I suggest that if you really want someone to treat you kindly and with respect, then perhaps referring to someone else's cherished belief as a magical sky wizard is not a good way to start. So you're right. People do want to be treated well, but sometimes we need to make sure that you got to treat people well too.
Right.
We do have a couple comments here from Katie Lander.
Hey,
Says
I know her.
You do know her. I don't think people have enough healthy, working, and successful marriages to look up to. Yeah. So it's seen as negative, something that takes hard work, something that is harder to leave when it's hard. And then
Or when you just don't think you're going to be happy in it.
Yeah. Are we not the bride of Christ? And that I'll let you hit on that because I was going to mention that too about the biblical imagery there. But as far as the first comment about not enough positive role models to look up to or examples to look up to, that's where it gets to be a never-ending cycle because you start allowing, like we talked about in the last story, easier. I just not entirely as happy as I should be, so I'm going to get divorced. So then what happens? People start seeing, they don't see successful marriages, they see a bunch of divorces, which then makes it easier to think you're going to get out of divorce. It's kind of a snowball effect.
It's normalized it. Yeah.
I have to just say, even in my own children, okay, I feel like, and the students that I teach too, I feel like if something is going to take hard work, they don't, either they haven't succeeded enough to understand that once they get through that hard work and they succeed, the satisfaction that comes with that is worth it. Or so either they don't have that modeled for them, or they haven't successfully made that journey themselves. Because when something takes a long time to do, it's funny because when it takes a long time to do, they always say to me, that they don't want to do it. They don't even see the purpose sometimes in doing hard work. And the worst thing is the longer it takes. And one time I said, the math is the same. One time I told my kids, the math is the same. You're just writing more for this one. Well, that's more work.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's that phrase? Anything worth doing is rarely easy.
Yeah.
And I'm going to use a phrase, actually, since Katie's watching, I'm going to use a phrase that she always uses, or an example that she always uses. We say all the time, and we're guilty of it as Christians, we make excuses for, oh, well, I'm tired. I don't feel like going to church or doing this or loving this person or going out and X, Y, or Z. Did Jesus ever make those excuses? Going back to your comment, Kate, about are we not the bride of Christ? Yeah. Are we not united to Christ? Are we not to imitate Christ? And so did Christ not take his cross to Calvary for us, despite the pain, despite knowing how much excruciating, that's where we get the word from, pain that he would be in. But he did it anyway out of love. And so it's that type of sacrificial love that we have been shown, and the one who has been forgiven much will love much, and we need to, I think, sometimes take a step back and reflect upon how much we have been forgiven, how much God has pursued us, how much he has loved us. and then allow that to allow us to be transformed by the renewing of our mind, allow that to transform our minds and thoughts in how we then love others.
Yeah. Amen. And I just love the bride of Christ imagery in general, because when I think about marriage, I think about the passages, biblical passages that talk about us as being the bride of Christ, and that really gives, I think, a lot of insight into what our marriages should look like, and so anyway, all right, let us move on to our next story, shall we? We are on to story number 3, and this one comes out of the UK. Ben, what's our British story for the evening?
All right. Actually, wasn't Adele our British story too? Is that a BBC?
Well, that was a BBC, but Adele's album is released worldwide.
That's
These
true.
events happened in Great Britain.
Fair enough. All right. So this story does, as we've mentioned, come out of Great Britain, actually from a hospital. It's Croydon University Hospital in Thornton Heath, England. And there is a nurse there by the name of Mary. I apologize for the last name, Onwoha. That's how I'm going to pronounce it. I apologize if I mispronounce it. But
now you know why I had him do this story.
Mary Onwoha, she's been employed at this hospital in Croydon University Hospital since 2002. So she's been there for 19 years. And she has this necklace that she always wears. She's a believer. She's a Christian. And she had this necklace that she always wears. She actually says, "My cross has been with me for 40 years. It's part of me, my faith, and it's never caused anyone harm." So it's this small little gold unadorned cross necklace. I mean, I'm sure we've all seen them. And she wears it with her all the time in her duties, and it's never caused any issue until 2015, where hospital management began telling Mary to remove or cover up her cross. And the reason they gave was safety concerns. And so she in turn refused. She pointed out, there's a little inconsistency there because other people of religious faiths were never asked to remove their necklaces. She said, for example, Hindus wear red bracelets on their wrists, female Muslims wear hijabs in theater. Yet my small cross around my neck was deemed so dangerous, I was no longer allowed to do my job. So they're kind of singling her out is what she's saying here. And kind of the icing on the cake, I guess the turning point, was in the middle of a surgery that she was overseeing. The staff came in and told her to remove or cover up her necklace or face action against her. And so she refused and continued on with the surgery. And they eventually had an internal investigation against her because she didn't remove her necklace. And she said, "I was astonished that senior staff were prepared to potentially endanger a patient's life," meaning come into the middle of the surgery where you got to scrub in and be completely sterile, and they're potentially endanger a patient's life in order to intimidate me to remove it. So they came in the middle of the surgery to tell her to remove her cross. And at the same time, the anesthetist in the same surgery was wearing a blue pendant and earrings, but was never asked to do the same. So in June of 2020, Miss Onwoha was forced to take a, quote, stress leave following increasing pressure from management. And eventually she was relieved of her duties. She was fired from her job. And she has now since filed legal action against this hospital. This is Croydon University Hospital. She's being represented by the UK religious liberty group Christian Concern, and that's where the story is at now. So I'll let you pick up with your thoughts there.
Yeah, it's sad that I think we're seeing more and more stories like this coming out of the UK. I mean, we talk about, sometimes the way Christianity is treated here in the United States, but I think sometimes we lose sight of how blessed we are in the United States. And at the same time, even these stories we're talking about out of the UK are nothing compared to what you see in some Middle Eastern countries and stuff and the way Christians are treated there. So, it's all relative to that. And I will preface this by saying that I am not, I don't need to wear a Christian billboard to declare that I'm a Christian. So I'm not big. I used to have a cross necklace that I liked and I wore all the time until the band broke and I couldn't wear it anymore. But am I going to get up on a soapbox and defend that every Christian should be wearing, you need to be free to go onto Amazon and order your big Christian t-shirts and wear them everywhere. And It's like, we as Christians, we don't need to be walking billboards for Jesus in that way. We should be walking billboards in the way we live our lives. People should know, they should know we are Christian by our love, and so do I think that someone wearing a cross necklace versus not wearing a cross necklace is the biggest deal in the world? No, but let's put a pin in that. Jory, get it, pin. See, now that being said, there are obviously some things about the story that are a bit disturbing. Now, I don't know. As a lawyer, I look at this and I have questions about it. There's some information that we're not being given, but what we are being given here certainly is enough to make you go, because one thing that really stood out to me most was not even the pendant or whatever that she said the other lady was wearing during the surgery, but she talks about here in 2015 when she was first asked to remove or cover up her cross, citing safety concerns. But when she refused, she pointed out that there were other nurses of other religious faiths who were never asked to remove their necklaces, bracelets, or loose clothing. And here's why I found that significant, and specifically the necklaces, because this is a necklace. All right. I can see an argument that you don't want, and I'm not a surgeon, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know how much risk this really is, but I'm just saying I can see it. Okay, well, you've got a dangly necklace, and you've seen the pictures. It's not like dangly, it's not like down to here or anything, but, you have something hanging around your neck. You don't want someone in surgery leaning over someone's body when they've got a necklace on. Okay, I don't think that's what she was doing. She's not the doctor. She was the nurse, but you try to say, okay, nobody in there is allowed to wear jewelry. If the hospital had a policy and equally enforced it that said nobody's allowed to wear a necklace, all right, or nobody's allowed to wear jewelry, all right, and she was refusing to take off her necklace because it was a cross, then I would say no. The loving Christian thing to do in that case is just take off the necklace, because the value of your Christianity and your Christian walk is not determined by how much Christian jewelry you have or wear. Okay, and if there is a legitimate safety concern, then that should be the loving response. But if there's a legitimate safety concern, then you would think they would be having that kind of universal rule that nobody can wear it. And what she's at least claiming here is that's not the case. There doesn't appear to be any universal safety rule. Other people wearing necklaces, which is what she is accused of being the safety hazard, were not being asked. So then that makes you go, to ask, okay, well, what is it that's making her necklace a safety concern and other ones allegedly not? I think the cross is a safety concern. It's a safety concern for anybody who doesn't yield to its message. That's my
Mic drop. Mic drop. Yeah, and I had that same kind of thought. Like, if it were universally enforced, as you said, then I wouldn't have as much of an issue with this. But at least what she's claiming is that it has not been. And to your point about not being a walking billboard, I just made mine so I can't take it off. So yeah, no, I don't. And I agree completely. It's not in our outward adornment, right?
I mean, I wear Christian T-shirts and clothing all the time, but that's not. But if
that's
I had to take
it,
that's not what makes a Christian, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have to prove your Christianity by like plastering Jesus stuff all over yourself. You know? You ever see the episode of Friends where Joey wants to convince people that he has a Porsche? A Porsche, so he goes out and he buys like a Porsche hat and coat and keys, and I think Ross's line is, "You look like a Porsche threw up on you."
Right.
You don't have to look like that with Christian paraphernalia in order to be a true Christian.
Yeah, don't look like Jesus threw up on you. I mean, he used spit to make mud and heal people's.
Hey, you know what would happen if Jesus performed that miracle today? Where he at one point healed one person's vision without mud and the other one using mud. We'd have two different denominations: the Muddites and the anti-Muddites.
I believe it. Yeah, and again, and I think you picked up on it at the beginning of your comment about. It's disturbing to see this coming out of the UK again. Here's another kind of trend, a growing trend toward an anti-Christian sentiment. I think again,
anti-religion. I mean, look at the Alta Fixler case. They really weren't valuing that family's religious beliefs either.
Yeah, that's true too. And we're seeing that, I think, more and more. And I think America, we're not quite at that level, but it doesn't take long to see what happens and it's happening in Canada. There was I don't know if you heard about the one pastor who refused to close his church down during COVID, and then he was in America doing tours, and then went back, and as soon as he got off the plane, they arrested him right in front of in plain view of everybody, more to make a statement. But I mean, yeah. So there's this anti-religion sentiment growing that seems to be something that, again, we shouldn't be taken by surprise for, because we know that it's going to increase as secularism increases. But yeah, how should we then respond as Christians when we see these sentiments growing? When we see cases like this? I think on an individual basis, certainly she's got a right to defend the loss of her job over this, especially if what she's claiming is accurate, that this was not equally enforced. I think she has the right to defend justice and hold her former employer accountable. At the same time, if it were like an equally enforced thing, then maybe she doesn't have as much ground there. But on a larger scale, when we see these anti-Christian, anti-religion sentiments growing, where does our responsibility lie in terms of standing our ground or yielding to authority? And all of this is going to go down
a whole other
rabbit hole
you can go down there. But I mean, I do. We've talked about before, yes, we're supposed to obey the civil authorities so long as they don't conflict with the law of God or the instructions of God and what His expectations of us. And so, yeah, I think that's where you draw the line. And when it comes to that is now, I do think that sometimes we Christians get too caught up in our, especially here in America, we get too caught up with our perceived rights. There's no Bill of Rights in the Bible. Okay, it's not there, and that's sometimes I think people superimpose this idea of rights that we get from our own Constitution and make it make a religious issue out of it. You don't have a Bill of Rights in that regard. Now, like you said, Christians are supposed to be the moral compass, I guess, in that regard, and so there's still a morally right and wrong things situation, and that should be our guiding principle. We should stand up for what is morally right and what is not morally right, which is why I will sit here and defend the parents of Alta Fixler, even though I'm not a Hasidic Jew, because there's, what's morally right and what's morally wrong is something that we should stand up for. How should we stand up for it? With gentleness and respect. And also, we need to have not to put too fine a point on it, but we need to have a Christian perspective, and we need to put Jesus first in these situations and not ourselves. So the classic example would be, if there was a potentially legitimate safety hazard in here, which it does not appear to be based on what we're saying, but if there was some kind of legitimate safety hazard, but somebody just wants to say, no, I want to still be able to declare my faith by wearing this necklace, and then they want to, turn around and say, well, then, I'm being persecuted against because I'm a Christian because they want me to remove this necklace. No, at that point, it's about you and you wanting to wear the necklace. There's nothing in the Bible that says thou shalt not go to heaven unless thou, wears a Christian necklace at least 75% of your days. It doesn't say that. And so that's not a sword we should be falling on. And so with those I think we do need to bear in mind that, when we do start talking about our rights, we need to just take a moment to think about it. Well, what do I mean by that? Am I talking about some perceived offense just to me that I think I should be able to do? Or am I speaking to the broader moral law, the objective moral law that comes from God's character? And then even then we need to then take the next step and say, okay, what is the most effective way to address this? Because lots of times, if you were to go out there as a Christian and try to speak out against every moral affront that happens that you come across even in a given day, you're never going to stop. Okay. I mean, every time someone cuts you off in traffic, you're going to chase them down, try to put a police siren on your car so you can get them over and so you can yell at them or whatever, and so you've got to pick your battles as far as what's going to be most effective in sharing the gospel. I think too often sometimes people will they'll see something that may legitimately be wrong, but then if you just react by not even being willing to listen to someone else's, you jump to your own conclusions, you don't know their story, and you just start accuse, is that person really ever going to accept the gospel? That was a long answer to your question, but
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
So, all right, let's move on to our last story, shall we?
Sure.
In our last story, I'm not going to spend too much time introducing it because I think it kind of speaks for itself. But there was Katie Couric, who I grew up with on the Today Show. Ben wasn't born yet when she was the Today Show host. But she then,
Seriously?
I don't think he went.
What year was she?
I don't know when she moved. When she left the Today Show. You'll find out. But let me ask you this: do you ever remember Katie Couric as the morning show co-host of the Today Show?
If I was around, I wasn't old enough to really care about watching the Today Show.
Yeah, no, it was for a while. The Today Show was the #1 morning show, and it was Katie Couric and Bryant Gumbel for a while there. And then, I'm not that they were the first ones; there were people before them, obviously. And then it was Matt Lauer, and well, we all know how that ended. So, but anyway, but then she went on to work for Yahoo News, and she recently released a new memoir, a book called Going There. Actually, technically, I guess it hasn't released yet. People must have preview releases. It looks like on October 26th. And it's just a personal memoir. But one of the stories she talks about in that book is about a sit-down interview that she had with the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, in 2016. And what Katie Couric mentioned in there is that when she was doing that interview with Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Justice Ginsburg made some comments that were critical of Colin Kaepernick and that whole movement of kneeling during the national anthem at sporting events. And I don't know if it was this interview, I think it was this interview where she actually referred to that as dumb. And yes, Justice Ginsburg did later, after there was backlash from these comments came out, she did apologize for that. Whether that's an apology because it's not really what she thought, or because people, that were in her corner criticized her for it, I don't know. But the bigger story is in the immediate aftermath of this interview, Katie Couric admitted in this memoir that she actually edited those statements severely, because, in her own words, she wanted to protect Justice Ginsburg. She said she justified it herself at the time. She said she was elderly and probably didn't quite understand the question. And she wanted to protect Ginsburg because she felt that the issue of racial justice was a blind spot for her. And it just, and of course, what's making the rounds here now about all this is, here we have a media personality who had certain facts, certain statements that were made by this person she was interviewing, but decided to try to shape the narrative because, let's face it, the notorious RBG, she has an image. From a certain side of the political aisle, she was very, very popular. And a statement like this could have hurt her popularity within that group. So Katie Couric, by her own admission in this memoir, decided to edit that to protect her from the reaction that would inevitably have come had she actually published and put out there the full statement. What do you think?
I mean, I think they say it well in this article. Basically, what Katie Couric did was, I underlined it here, she reimagined her hero's actual words to comport with what, in her mind, she actually represents. In other words, she printed the legend. Basically what you're saying. She severely edited, and kind of at the end, to their credit, this is a Yahoo News article, that the end of here says, bias isn't just what you cover, it's also what you decide not to cover. By employing the sin of omission, the media protects its progressive heroes and in the process picks political winners and losers. Instead of telling us the facts, they print the legend. Is it any surprise we don't believe them anymore? I mean, yeah, I was actually surprised that Yahoo News even admitted that. They're kind of sort of mainstream media, and for them to say, mainstream media is not trustworthy, and nor should they really be, at least that's kind of the impression that I was left with, is very telling, I think. And we're no strangers. We haven't shied away from saying it on this show. We don't really trust the media as far as being unbiased. I mean, no media outlet is going to be truly unbiased. But there's being biased, and then there's actively editing out or changing what an interviewer says, basically, to such a degree that you've omitted her whole response, basically. Which I think, if anything, this should tell us. Well, actually, and I did want to. You said that RBG had issued an apology. Was it actually RBG? Because what I read here was that the head of public affairs for the Supreme Court issued the apology.
Oh, that may be. I thought I read something that Allison actually sent us, and I thought it said that RBG herself did, but I don't know how long after the fact that was.
Yeah, it could be. If anybody knows whether it was RBG herself or the head of public affairs, because that might be telling too. If she actually went back on her word, or if the head of public affairs thought that she should go back, because there's just kind of perpetuating that, printing the legend. If the head of public affairs was like, no, she misspoke. This is really what she meant.
Right.
Really, effectively, you're muzzling her free speech.
Yeah.
And it's concerning, actually. I would be lying if I didn't say I was concerned about that, because how many other times, and this article goes on to talk about how many other times we've seen in practice. It says liberal media bias is a longstanding and observable phenomenon. There are places in recent history we can point to where, as recently as one of the examples it uses here is the portrayal of a lab leak theory for COVID as a debunked quote unquote conspiracy theory. Well, they've come out and gone against that narrative. And so it's just, how are we to know what's misinformation when there's so much mainstream media and quote unquote fact checkers out there who are perpetuating it?
Yeah. Well, and Kay Briggs here on YouTube says Katie Couric was a member of the Boys Club. Make no mistake, her one and only priority was herself and career. Look, I've said before on the show, I don't know Katie Couric. I'm not going to go out and say what her motivation was, what kind of person is. I have no idea. I do think, like you're saying though, Ben, that this particular example is an immoral one. I mean, it is an immoral one, and so this. Says that, not to mention Katie's hit piece on Sarah Palin. I'm not familiar with that one, but there's another one coming up. All right, I got to wait for a second.
No, it's in between those.
Okay, I missed the one in between. I've only got 3 from Kay Briggs.
I didn't hear you read the second one.
Oh, yeah, I read it as part of the first one. I just went right into it because they kind of went together. But I'll tell you that, this is... I'll give you an example. And again, I'm an independent. I'm not politically aligned with one party or the other. So please just take this as an example of why I don't trust the media. And that's my intention anyway. But there was, and I'm not a fan of former President Trump. I don't defend a lot of his actions. Okay. But in this instance, I understand his frustration. And this is how the media sometimes works. During the campaign, there were a number of times, including during one of the debates. It wasn't the debate, it's the one where they weren't actually debating each other. They were each interviewed separately. Yeah, the town hall thing. Where the questions were repeatedly posed to him, will you finally denounce white supremacy? And you understand that there's an assumption in that question. What's the assumption in that question? That you haven't denounced white supremacy.
Right.
And he had. Over and over and over again. And actually in the debate, he called I can't remember who it was, the town hall, I'm trying to remember the media lady who was interviewing him there, the woman there, I can't remember which one it was now, but he kind of called her out on it. And that wasn't, the town hall as a whole wasn't his proudest moment, but in this instance, he called her out on it and says, I have, you keep asking that question that way. But I have over and over again, and somebody put a video together of all the different times he had denounced it. But you see, this is another example where the media tries to not just report the news, but to shape it, to shape our perceptions of it. And please understand, I could give you examples. I'm not going to go into there, but I'm not going to go too much. But I just talked to my wife the other day about an example that I saw on Fox News where they were kind of doing the same thing. So understand that I'm not saying I don't like the media, period. All right, because this is the type of thing they do. They try to shape the narrative. But what's sad about this is that I see in look, the reality is people are complex. We are all individuals. And when you see someone...
Savannah Guthrie?
It might have been Savannah Guthrie. Yeah, I think she might have been the one that was doing the interview. The town hall thing. But
I'm not sure that it was...
I can't remember for sure. I'm trying to remember now. It's been a little while. But anyway, but people are complex creatures. But we want to create, kind of like you said, Ben, we want to create these heroes, and we want to, believe about them what we want to believe. Frankly, we want to believe that they agree with us on every single thing, and nobody agrees with somebody else on every single thing. There's some people you're going to have more beliefs in common with than some others that you're not. But we're all unique individuals, and that's why I'm a big proponent of the marketplace of ideas, because we need to feel free to discuss those, because the only way we're ever going to see where we do have things in common and where we can find common ground is if we're allowing ourselves to have open and honest conversations about what we truly believe. But unfortunately, we live in a culture now where we've gotten this us versus them mentality where we feel like we have to divide everybody up into teams. And this team, this group of people all believes X, and this other team, this group all believes Y. And so if you're on team X, you have to believe, or this team, you have to believe everything's about X. If you're on this other team, you have to believe everything about Y.
There's no crossover.
And no crossover. And that's just not the way people's beliefs really are and the people's minds really work. And so if we could get out of this us versus them mentality and realize that we're all complex creatures that have our unique set of beliefs, then that can actually foster more meaningful conversation.
Yeah, and from a Christian side of things, kind of not necessarily related to this story itself, but the general principle behind it, and to borrow their phrase, printing the legend, how often do we as Christians treat God the same way? We try to edit the Bible to agree with, kind of pick and choose, cherry pick verses that support our particular beliefs, what we want to believe. Yet we leave out kind of the harder parts of Scripture to wrestle with. A lot of churches
today try to throw out a lot of Paul's writings because they don't like some of the hard things that he said.
There was that whole movement a couple years ago to unhitch the whole Old Testament from the Bible. Like, you can't do that. Yeah, Scripture explicitly says, don't add or subtract from this word. And even there's in modern evangelicalism, we see this tendency to paint God or Jesus even as this all-loving, all-accepting kind of person. Well, that's really only half the picture. You leave out God's other attributes, his justice, his holiness. To get we need a full picture of who God is to understand really the richness of that mercy and why we deserve his wrath, and that makes his mercy all the sweeter.
So when were you born? What year?
89.
Okay, so you have lived in the Katie Couric era.
Mm-hmm.
She actually joined the Today Show in 1989 and was actually co-host from 1991 all the way up to 2006. I didn't realize it was that late. But we do have a couple other comments here. Kay Briggs says, and Biden gets a free pass despite being obvious decline. The only thing I would say is I wouldn't say Biden gets a free pass because, well, Fox News certainly criticizes Biden quite a bit. Yeah. But I would agree with you that by and large, the media establishment tends to lean more liberal than it does conservative. And I don't think there's any such thing as an objective media establishment nowadays. Which also, by the way, is why Fox News gets higher ratings because there are more media establishments on that lean left, and so that's going to diversify and split up their pool of potential viewership. Whereas it's not to say that Fox News is the only one. Obviously, you've got oh my gosh, why am I Daily Wire, and so you've got other things like that out there. But there aren't as many options, certainly not in the mainstream media things. So I do think that you see, like anything, whatever the political slant is of the media outlet, that's how they're going to treat a particular story. And Brian Brennell has the how you doing, Brian? He has the quote of the night here, I think. When the mainstream media calls it misinformation, it's probably true.
Brian Brennell gets the mic drop.
We talked about that some last week. Some of the things that were all labeled as misinformation last year that now turned out to be completely true. I just don't trust the media. Period.
Yeah.
So and it's a form of idolatry.
Yeah.
In this, because we create people rather than worship God, and like you're saying, we try to edit out even God's word. We set up these people to be our idols, and inevitably, what image do we create those idols in? As Katie Couric here shows you, we create them in our own image because we're going to reshape Ruth Bader Ginsburg based upon what we think she should stand for rather than what she actually does. Well, how do you determine what she should stand for? Well, that's you. So you're making Ruth Bader Ginsburg into an idol, ultimately in your own image.
How would Ruth Bader Ginsburg feel about her words being twisted so that she's no longer has her own opinion, but now she's become a caricature of what you believe she represents?
Yeah.
She flat out said what she represents.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's, that's a disturbing tendency, I think, on our end, and something that we as Christians do too. Okay. We were just talking the other day about, I hate to bring this one up again, because last time I did, somebody stole our entire video and uploaded it to their own page, and I had to get it taken down. Ravi Zacharias. Let's call a spade a spade. many Christians did the exact same thing with Ravi Zacharias. And as a result of us putting him up on this pedestal, he got away with a lot of stuff and didn't get caught really until after he passed away, that it all really started coming out. But if you start looking at the evidence, you realize that it was there years beforehand. Years beforehand.
Turned a blind eye to it.
We turned a blind eye to it because we set him up as this idol, essentially. So it is something that I think we need to be wary of as well. And for those of you that watch those programs, know the high regard I held Ravi Zacharias, and so that was a painful thing for me to witness.
Likewise.
So, all right. That was it, right? That was all 4 stories?
Yes.
I got them all?
So.
We got them all? We got through them all? All right. So for those of you, if you weren't watching at the top of the show, I do want to recap a couple things here before we go. First of all, thank you very much for watching. We appreciate all the input, all the interaction this evening. There is no show next week. All right, no show next week. Ben's going to be out of town. I've got a class that I'm starting to teach. That is going to be live streamed. It's on understanding evil from a Christian perspective. It's going to be 7 o'clock Thursday nights, probably about an hour and a half right here on the channel. You can find that. And that's also, you can interact there. If you have a question during the course of the class, I'll hopefully, my plan is, I think, maybe to have some kind of device where I can see it. I hope. And so, you'll be able to interact and ask questions as we go through there on YouTube. So please tune in for that. As a result, we will be back in 2 weeks on November 3rd, I think it is, Wednesday, November 3rd, for
my last episode.
There you go, before Ben is leaving us to, do that whole pastor thing in Pennsylvania. So you may make cases she needs to make pouty faces. Yeah, there you go. So we won't be here next week. We will be here in 2 weeks. And then after that, we're going to have the show is going to be on a hiatus for a little while. We'll be back after the holidays, but I do need to finish up this class. This class, I don't think I mentioned at the top of the show. This is my capstone project. I've been, studying Christian apologetics for well over 2 decades, coming up on 2.5 decades now. Just never got a degree in it. And so I decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to go. I had an opportunity open up to me to go get a Master of Arts in Christian Apologetics from Luther Rice Seminary. So I've been working on that for a few years now, and this is my capstone project for that. I'm writing the materials for the class myself. I'm teaching the class myself. And so obviously that's taking up an awful lot of my time. And I need to kind of finish that. Once I get through this, we get to December, I'll actually be done with my degree program. So
congratulations to you again.
Well, thank you very much. And so then I'll be able to, hopefully have a little more time to get some things going in January. Congratulations.
No.
Yeah, so anyway, so that's the plan for the future. Thank you very much, everybody. We do have Edna Line. I can see it on the screen. It hasn't shown on my screen, but I can see it on the screen there. It says blessings to all. Well, thank you very much.
Edna.
And thank you to everybody who's sending hearts to Ben. And Ben, thank you for my heart.
Oh, you
So, although he never sent a heart to his wife, even though she was watching. I'm just saying. I shouldn't have to spoon feed it to you.
She came on after the whole heart thing.
Send your wife a heart either.
I love you.
No glass house.
No glass house. All right. We got to get going. It's late. Thank you very much, everybody, for watching. Again, no episode next week. We will be back in 2 weeks. And if you have any comments after the fact, put them in the comments section on the YouTube video, and we will address them at the top of the next show. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Mary Kay. Thank you, all of you, for watching. And see you next time. God bless.